Right. Well, welcome everybody. This is the July 2024 meeting of the Kinship of the Herd membership group. And right now I have 4 participants with me and might be having a couple more join in. So as always, I'm just going to have those of you who are here introduce yourselves real quickly. If you haven't been here before, it's really just kind of your name, where you are, anything you want to share about yourself, about why you're here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then we'll launch into the conversation. So let me just go in the order that we're on the screen. So Shannon, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Shannon. I live in Ravenel also. And I met Kim in a drum circle cacao group and wanted to be around horses because I grew up with horses and volunteered to shovel poop once a week. So my son and I go out and get to spend time with the horses every Friday morning. So that's the highlight of our week. So glad to be here.
It's the highlight of my week too. It's awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Okay, Mary.
I'm Mary Seegers. I'm from Hartsville, South Carolina. And I've certainly enjoyed these classes. I have 2 meetings a week and I get confused with Zoom. I'm supposed to be Zooming. So I'm right with you, Kim.
That's right. You're in another class with me right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been awesome. All right. Jerry Ann.
I'm Jerry Ann Nichols from Monroe, Washington. And I've been following Kim, I don't know, for a year more now. And started initially with your first offering of your boundary class online. And now I think you have the new and improved versions, and it's all very exciting. Although I haven't taken it again, I've gone on it's been a nice supportive group. And I love having the conversations and the exchange and the level of respect and interest in each other's journeys. So.
Well, it's really good to see you. I hadn't seen you in a couple months, so
I know it's been crazy. That's a whole nother story, but yeah.
Well, it's really good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys too.
All right, and Karen, this is your first meeting, so introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Karen Pardish. I'm from Sarasota, Florida, where it's been way too hot. Let's see, I had heard of Kim for a while, and her reputation preceded her, and I had the opportunity to go visit her for 2 days. It was super fun, learned a lot, had a great time. So now I'm a huge fan. So here I am. So anyway.
Awesome. And I've shared with the group, Karen, about the cranial sacral work you did on me, and then on Brady. So everybody's probably peripherally a little bit familiar with you already. So yeah.
So here I am. Thank you for saying that. Because what I want to do is, if anybody's put me on a pedestal, please take me off.
Same here.
I hate falling off of them, and because I get badly bruised every time. So please take me off a pedestal right now. So
we're all just real people here. It's right. There's no expectations about anyone being up here.
Great. Then I'm in the right group. Yay. Thanks. And I'm super glad to be here. So
thank you. We're glad you're here too. All right, Kathy.
Hi. Well, some of you know me as Kim's aunt, so I'm always glad and find it a lot of fun and interesting to join when I can. So I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. I live near Toronto, Ontario. So someone said, complaining of the heat in Sarasota, it was very hot today here too. So I think it's kind of a general feeling lately.
I think it's hot everywhere. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm really glad you could be here, Aunt Kathy.
Thank you.
And Peggy.
Hi. Sorry, I was in a few minutes late, but made it. Yay. I am Peggy Stella from Honeoye Falls, New York, yet another hot spot. We're, yeah, still dealing with some heat today, but yeah, I was like been traveling just a little bit, so I'm kind of like getting my feet back on the ground. And so anyway, so glad I could join this evening, and it's great to see everybody.
Yeah, it's really good to see you too, Peggy. I'm excited to have a really good group tonight. So the topic for tonight that I picked is the topic of listening. I introduced it a little bit in the intro in the forum, and this is just a topic that has been coming up a lot for me lately. A couple people on here know that I recently got introduced to the gene keys. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. We're not going to dive into that tonight, but at any rate, the gene keys have different aspects of yourself, and my life purpose gene key had to do with listening and empathy, and it was very interesting. The reading and the audio about that was quite compelling. So that got me kind of really thinking about, you know, my relationship with listening. And then since then, it seems like the topic just keeps coming up in different ways. So I thought, you know what, this is kind of what I do with these monthly meetings, is whatever sort of on my radar at the time, that's what I choose to come on and just like powwow around with everybody. So a couple things just to kind of prompt us that I wrote in the forum. You know, there's a difference. Most of us have contemplated the difference between listening and hearing. You know, we can hear words or we can hear things and not necessarily really be listening to what someone else is saying or what they mean. We can listen with our ears, we can to someone's words, or we can also listen with our hearts, right? Karen saying with our hands. She's excellent. That's what she does. She listens with her hands. We can listen to we can listen with and to our bodies, other parts of our bodies as well. I know Peggy also works a lot with listening to bodies in a different way than Karen does, but I bet there's a lot of similarities. And then in my book, even, I wrote about one of the chapters, or one of the lessons was about communication is not optional, and how even when we don't know we're communicating things, others are listening, right? And sometimes receiving information from us, even when we're not intentionally trying to communicate it. So these were some of the things that sort of I've been floating around in my head about listening. And I'd love to just maybe open it up and see, is there any other kind of listening that I haven't mentioned that comes to your minds immediately?
I think you were referring to it, but body language is I
Absolutely.
think you were implying that, but specifically, I mean, we do listen to other people by just looking at them too.
And when we listen in that regard, we're kind of listening with our eyes, but I think we're also listening a little bit with our hearts, right? We're kind of feeling into the other person or the other, or even an animal.
I was thinking, I mean, I'm not to, split hairs on things, but the discussion makes me think about, well, I'm listening with my heart. I'm listening to my heart, but sometimes I'm listening maybe in meditation for something that's not necessarily, well, this is really splitting hairs, whether it's in me or it's a message to me.
Well, you hit a couple different things.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot there that the first thing when you said, are there kinds of listening that we didn't mention, and I'm thinking, I'm putting this label spiritual listening, but yet it could be to myself, or it could be to a greater sense around me, whether it's environment or universal or beyond time. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking in terms of when you bring that up.
No, I think those are all really good things. Part of what that might be is listening to our own intuition or our own inner wisdom. It might be, as you say, on a spiritual meditative prayer, right? Those levels, it might be receiving information, right? somehow. And that gets into all of the sixth senses, right?
Right.
The voyances, the clairvoyant, and all of those too, which I think are all probably abilities that we all have the capacity for. We may or may not be using them or in tune with them, but that's another way that we can listen.
I think with animals, it is all about observing and feeling what they're trying to communicate. It's no words. So you have to be open to, what do you really want? Are you trying to tell me by your actions? So it's a lot of things coming together at once. But I mean, like, the animal cannot tell you if he feels bad, so you have to kind of go here and there and check it out as best you can and see if you can figure it.
That even leads to context, right? The context that something is spoken in or said in, or behavior. Sometimes we have to, whether it's words or behaviors or any message that we receive, we sometimes have to take it into full context to be able to really hear or understand what's actually going on or what's actually being communicated.
I think with the horses, a lot of the listening that I do helps me to ask better questions.
Can
You
you say a little more about that?
So, we listen and we get information, right? And, or we're receiving information, and then what? Right? So we hold the information, but, so in a case where I'm working, right? If I'm treating a horse or human, I don't always understand all of what I'm feeling. And so I want to ask more questions about the information I'm getting. So maybe I'm visually getting a piece of information and I'm not yet feeling it in my hands. So, I want to validate that back and forth, or I might intuit, a piece of information, want to validate that. So for me, it's a lot of asking better questions and keeping the conversation going, right? Developing the conversation. So, listening's a big part of that. And then what? Are we just holding space for the listening? Because, that can be incredibly significant, and healing and nurturing and empowering and all those great things. But so, I feel like listening step one, and it opens the door to all kinds of avenues. And so what's the intention for the session, for the time, if you're sitting with your herd, or whatever that is, listening to the bird, the bird call in the morning, the bird language in the morning,
what's the intention to that? Yeah. Well, and even the asking clarifying questions, I think that's a part of good listening, all different kinds of listening, right? Is being able to ask questions to make sure that we're actually hearing what the person is saying, or that we are really understanding it. So I think that asking clarifying questions is important in any kind of good listening. Definitely bring up a great point about what's the intention.
Yeah, that's really,
Yeah.
yeah, what's the intention?
Of the
Yeah.
whole conversation, right? Or
Yeah.
the listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Peggy, when you're working with, well, tell everybody a little bit about kind of what you do, or your love of working with the body.
It's, to trying to sort of like, I work in terms of with movement within the body to try to find trying to find the place of balance and the place of, alignment and balance, so that we can get that true stillness, or like where it's like when finding the spot of greatest integrity. within the body. And so the listening piece is really taking in information from all sorts, like just not just visually, but also looking at structure and looking at how it moves. And there's there's the energetic piece. So there's so many places where like it's all information gathering. So to me, listening means gathering that information, but that intention is what's like kind of what's the message behind all the information that I'm gathering. And I think that and to try to get to the to the greatest like kernel of truth around, with that piece of it. So what is the body, like what does the body need, or how can the body best get to that place of balance? So that's the listening that I feel like, to me, when I think of listening, it's like opening up so that you can gain the information from any given spot with the intention of getting the truest message that you possibly can. I don't, I'm like kind of trying, it's sort of hard to,
Yeah.
it's hard to put it into language.
Well, I'm really curious with Peggy, Karen, and Shannon, because Shannon, you also work with bodies in a way, right? And the listening. And so with each of you, what would you say is the primary tool or tools you use for your listening to the body? Like Peggy, you were saying visually sometimes. Like
Visually.
what do you use to listen when you're working with someone? Mostly.
Everything I possibly can.
Yeah.
For me, it's it's so often if I go looking over here, for something, whatever I think it is, inevitably it's over here, the answer is over here. And so for me, it's staying open.
Yeah.
Right. And not,
Right.
and realize that even though I might be going down this trail, maybe the kernel is over here, or the key to finding the solution that you might be looking for.
Okay.
Yeah. So in my work, we talk a lot about listen and follow. And, and I love that, listen and follow and listen and follow. And I have, I've even found with the horses that, and with people, that sometimes you get led down a false path. And there's such a beautiful purpose for that. And so to hold space for I'm not, and what often happens with that false path is that they're not ready to deal with the root cause yet. And so to allow that opportunity, and I'm sure with all of us, we've been in conversations where we don't quite feel heard, or in the past we've not felt heard or listened to or properly dealt with, so we don't want to go to a vulnerable place. So being able to listen and follow the horse down what I refer to as a false path, that might validate that I'm actually listening.
Ooh, I want to just let that sit for a minute, okay? Because that's really cool, I think, and maybe a key point to like listening well is like not having an agenda to what it is we are wanting to hear.
Correct.
Because we don't know, like, yeah, maybe the person we are listening to just needs to know that we are listening.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. In order to that may be all they need, right? Is to know that we're listening.
That's like step one of healing is being able to share your story, right?
Yeah.
Or, often in my world, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but
So Shannon, do you have anything that comes to you through this conversation, or
Well, I use tuning forks in my work. So I'll either like I receive information like one of three ways. Either I hear it in the fork, like if I'm in a spot in someone's field and there was anxiety for a particular time, it'll get kind of shrill or anxious. If there was like depression, like the sound will literally get sucked out of the fork. It'll be like, whoa. So I listen for that. And same thing like you, Karen, sometimes it just drops in, like, and you intuit something, like it'll just, and I stopped asking, like, where did that come from? And I used to like get in my head and argue with it and be like, well, I'm not going to say that. That's weird. And then the fork would get pissed off and it would just keep on getting louder and louder. And I'd be like, fine, I'm just going to say it. And then the fork would like settle down. And then I also can feel it in my body as well. So those are kind of the three things for me. Sometimes it's a combination of the both, but
I love this. Yeah, so Peggy, Karen, and Shannon are talking about listening at really high levels because of the work that they do. And that's, I think, probably partly why each of you were drawn to that work, is you are gifted listeners, or you enjoy listening. You enjoy that mystery and curiosity, right? I'd love to hear from Mary and Kathy, like, because this is like a whole different level of listening, perhaps. Or do you relate to what they're saying in your lives?
Not sure I can relate to it exactly. I can certainly understand it. It makes sense to me. I've never experienced, the kinds of work they're doing. I know there's been a lot of professionals who do hands-on work and they listen with their hands, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. What about when,
It's intriguing to listen to it.
I know that you like to garden. Do you feel like you listen with your hands when you garden? Do you get information?
Sometimes. I don't know that I would restrict it to my hands.
Okay. Tell me more.
It's more of the word context was thrown out before, and it's more it's the soil, it's the flowers, might be the vegetables. I mean, lately I've been, I'm not sure yet whether it's rabbits or raccoons, but they seem to like a lot of my things in the garden this year. It was slugs for a while, and I think I conquered the slugs. Now I've got something else a lot bigger than slugs going on. So I don't know, it's pushing maybe listening to a different level, but if I go out in the morning and I've got a whole plant that's been devoured, the flower's about ready to pop or something, why did that rabbit need those flowers? There's no one to really listen to you. Today I had a friend on my deck, and after a while we just said, we just need to be quiet, because the birds were it was just a symphony orchestra going on. You could hear them answering each other. So I don't know that it's limited to flowers. And then they were taking turns into my bird bath, and it was so hot, and they were just splashing away, and you could listen to them almost. At one point I said, if they were a cat, you could listen to them purring. You just felt that those birds were so happy in that water because it was so warm outside.
So you were in some ways listening with your heart then, not just to the sound of the water, but you could feel there was an emotion attached to, you felt like you could sense their emotion through what you were seeing and hearing, right? And feeling. Maybe. Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, I think that's right. A lot of times too, if I'm outside, the wind, when you first threw out the topic of listening, the first thing that popped into my mind is how much I enjoy listening to the wind.
Yeah.
And I don't know quite where that fits into all this discussion, but oftentimes when I'm on walks or I'm working in the gardens in the wind, it has different levels of messages that seem to come through the men, almost like Jerry Ann was talking about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can sense it trying to say things or move in patterns or in waves.
I love that. Yeah. Mary, what about you?
Well, I am more with Aunt Kathy. I absolutely am in awe of these ladies that have this extra special talent. I mean, I'm just like, what? And I think it's the coolest thing ever. And I could sit there and listen to all of them talk about it, but I have never personally had that ability. But it is a gift, I think, that you're born and given to share. And I love it. To me, I am just like, I think I take it in with my heart and my eyes. As hot as it is, I have to be outside after the sun goes down and watch the fireflies light and the breeze come through the trees. I mean, my cat's playing around. It is just peace, totally peace. And you know, I hear woodpeckers in the woods, and it's just a symphony just to have that quiet with these beautiful natural sounds. And I guess that's listening with my soul.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Well, it reminded me when you said that, I think I wrote about this in the book, but I know I've talked about it since, is that as prey animals, horses are always taking in information with all of their senses. And I used to think, and kind of was always led to believe, they're always on watch for danger, right?
Mhm.
But when I really spend time with the horses, I realize they're doing basically what you just talked about doing, which is they're just listening and looking and smelling for confirmation that everything's okay,
Yeah,
right? The birds are singing, all the things that are normal are happening. The things that I know are everything around me is saying everything's okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I can even smell, like I was walking today and I smelled the pine needles as they started to drop, and it reminded me of smelling them in Montana. And so it's just these memories come back from smells. It's bizarre. And I mean, the pluff mud, I smell that, and I just goes back to all these wonderful times that I just love being in that low country thing. And so it's all nature based, I think. And I totally tune into my animals, like, you aren't feeling well today if you do this, or you're feeling great because you ate really well. So I mean, these animals are really my life. And so that sounds kind of sad, but um
Not at all. Not among this
um,
group, it doesn't.
yeah, it's just a joy to be so satisfied with simple. It is just a joy.
And everything you just talked about, like noticing, is again another way of listening, maybe, right?
Yeah,
All the little things you notice that tell you how your animals are feeling. We notice in
yeah,
people that we care about and love. We notice things. That's in some ways a way of listening
yeah,
or hearing.
because they can't talk, you know, they can't tell
Well,
you.
they can't talk in our language.
Right.
Hmm.
So you have to go another level, sort of, to, like, I always thought a veterinarian was so cool because they have to go another level. They have no conversation with the animal they're trying to help. So
Jerry Ann, what about you? Anything that this brings up, or what kind of listening you enjoy most? Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Oh yeah, no, there you are. There you are.
Am I here? Okay. Well, I think the word context is good, but also, how do I want to say? I've been thinking a lot about how we can listen in neutral, like we're just being neutral and not bringing any judgments or criticisms or labeling or, because that's what we do to be safe too. I mean, our nervous system is doing all this work when we're faced with whatever we're listening to. And I'm thinking about with the horse, sometimes I have an agenda, I have a project, I have something I'm going to accomplish with her or do with her or teach her. So I'm going to listen differently or come with different boundaries in my listening than I might if I was just going to go out there at 10 o'clock at night and stand with her in the cool air and just breathe. I mean, there might be a different way that I would listen. And I think I look back some of the listening I might have done in my hospice work when you're always trying to heal or fix, or you think you're trying to relieve someone's pain, you may listen differently than if you just listen in neutral. And I've been really am fascinated about what kind of communication can happen when I truly find neutral. And I know that's kind of an obscure word right at the moment, but that's kind of what it brings up for me. I'm trying to figure out what is neutral for me, maybe with a difficult individual in my life. How can I listen and be present in neutral? One, not just for their sake, but also for my sake, because when I'm not able to listen non-judgmentally, or when all that stuff comes in the conversation, it can hurt my heart too, or it can create emotions. There's a reaction in the listening, so that's what it kind of brings up for me, because I have a challenging situation in my life where I'm listening and watching, but there's some it's affecting me as I listen. So I'm kind of trying to find neutral and
I
see
really love that, actually. I think that is a very high level art and skill.
But it's not. But I think we don't always have to quote listen in neutral. Sometimes we have to be listening because there's an emergency and you can't be necessarily in neutral. You're saving your life, or you're saving someone else's, or you're getting the heck out of the way of the horse that's going crazy on you or whatever. You're listening, but you got to listen for where's the escape hatch. I don't know, but you know what I mean? So I mean, I think there's levels of it, and there's choices about, and I'm thinking a lot about how much attention goes into the listening. Am I listening unconsciously, just getting through my day and I'm picking up what's around me, or is it focused attention where I've deliberately sort of gone into neutral, cleared my energy, cleared my soul, cleared my heart, or wherever I'm carrying stuff that gets in the way of my hearing. Does that make sense? Because I loved what she said about listening with her soul. Because man, I'd like to listen to with my soul, but sometimes my soul's got dirty laundry. and I'm not hearing very clearly. I can feel like I'm getting some
Static.
yeah, exactly. I'm not getting that very clear because I got dirty laundry and it's just not coming through very well. So that's kind of I know that's a lot. I love these discussions, ladies. You all make me think a lot.
You just made me think a lot. I think that those were excellent comments. Yeah. Peggy.
Yeah, that sort of like made me start thinking too. But I just think hearing what folks are having to say, and I was kind of like loving when Mary was talking about. She said, "Oh, it was a symphony, and it was so great to be quiet." I mean, I'm like, isn't that kind of an amazing thing to say when
Symphony and quiet at the same time.
Yeah, it was so nice to be quiet, and like in the same sentence as the birds were a pure symphony. anything, and then what, like what Jerry Ann is talking about, getting to that point of like neutrality or whatever. And I was thinking, wow, it's like you have to, like, much what I was saying, what I search for, even in looking for where the body, like trying to get the body to that place where it's free of tension and really balanced and aligned. But that point of balance, such as like, how do we get as still as as possible, so that we are able to be able to receive. That so off, if we're agitated or not in balance or not in that place of quiet for ourselves and in our souls, then it's really, really difficult to take that information in. So a lot of it, and so that's why, like, Jerry Ann's like really stimulated me to say, it's like, yeah, it really does have a lot to do with where we are. So it's not, as we're taking in the information, where are we?
Right. And
Yeah.
if we're not really, really quiet, the softer communication,
Yes.
sounds, the subtle nuances, we're maybe not going to notice, right? I even when Karen was doing my craniosacral session, and I think, and this has happened with Shannon too, where it's like, okay, relax. I think I'm relaxed when I start, right? And then I realize as the session goes on, either in response to the sounds or a touch or a really shift this way, and my body goes, oh yeah, like I was holding tension there. Like I didn't even notice it until that real subtle whatever touched me there. So yeah, we're not, that sensitivity of how quiet are we, how still, how subtle, and how soft is the communication, then we can hear at a different level, maybe. Yeah, Karen.
It's interesting.
Yeah, so I want to, if you don't mind me sharing about your session that I did with you,
Sure.
and what Jerry Ann is talking about, the neutral, holding neutral, right? And the presence that goes along with that. Well, I didn't do a formal, I was treating Kim outside after we had spent a beautiful morning, several hours working with Kim's work and her herd. And then I got her on the table. And so it wasn't in my office, so it wasn't a formal intake kind of thing. And she, as I picked up her head and have her head in my hands, she reveals to me she had a rather serious accident many, many, many years ago. And it was a huge thing, and so for me to hold space for her and hold space for her sharing. And it would be the kind of thing, if she was telling me face to face over Zoom, I'd like have this huge reaction. However, it wasn't appropriate in that time. So it was just like, oh, here's information, and practice discernment and going, oh, well, that's a kind of a big deal,
It's like I this bomb, but yeah, but what was interesting is like I hadn't even thought to share that before, and until she got to that point and she was touching me in that particular place, it was like I suddenly remembered that I'd had an accident, right? And then I realized that I hadn't talked to my body about that in a really long time, for whatever reasons, right? We want to be healed and move on. We don't want to be thinking about that. But
it was so long ago, right? And and you're doing really well, and that's what's important, right?
But my body did still have things to say about that, right?
Absolutely.
It was quite interesting. But until we ask, again, you ask more questions and you get curious, then you can go
And
deep
listen,
and
right?
listen.
And listen.
Yeah.
And allow that injury to kind of come back to light, as what can we do to heal it in this moment?
Right.
How can we support that healing, in that?
And that actually even takes me back a little bit to context of like, you know, that accident isn't something I talk about very often to anyone anymore. At the time when it happened, it was all, you know, all we could talk about. But then many, many, many years later, but any conversation we have with anyone, human, animal, anything, right? There's always so much more information than what we're touching with the conversation we're having. So I don't know that, I don't know where I'm going with that, except that like what a beautiful thought to just always remain curious. You never
Yeah.
know what's underneath what's being said, how many more layers there are
Yeah.
to
I
discover.
love that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what Jerry Ann said, with the where neutral is, you know, where is neutral, and how do we practice discernment in that place of neutral, right?
Yeah. Well, and even like a different context, I was talking to someone else, or in my boundaries class now, we've been talking this past week about vulnerability, right, Mary? And like, when is it safe to reveal your vulnerabilities, right? And then like, so there you were, Karen, and I tell you, drop this huge thing on you that's, you know, the vulnerable thing about my neck, but also like, you know, just a large piece of information that I don't tell a lot of people because there's just no reason to. But like, how do we hold space when someone unexpectedly like really gets very vulnerable, shares something that's like, whoa, right? How do we stay in neutral and hold space for that thing that could even be triggering for us or not? How do we listen well? Anybody have any examples of that where someone has surprised you by sharing something that you didn't expect? And how did you listen? How did you receive that? You don't have to share any private information.
During COVID, I had quite a few people share with me, and it was just, and it took me by surprise, was like that they had issues with drinking during COVID and being home, and that it, you know, they were trying, and it was interesting because it was like within this 1 month period, like people that I never would have guessed like had told me that. And and I know now that I don't need, and luckily I knew at the time, like I didn't need to react. I think they just needed to be heard and to say it to somebody. And I like in my work and marrying, caring, you're probably the same way. It's just, you just hold that space to allow them, you know, to honor what they're going to say. So in the past, I would have had to like say something to kind of like make it better. I had just taken this online class and the teacher had said something interesting, and I was guilty of this myself too. She was talking about when they were like in this healing circle, and this woman was sharing about something that had come up for her during this circle, and she started crying, and people are uncomfortable when other people cry. So this woman went over and was like hugging on her. And she said the woman who was hugging on her put her discomfort in front of that woman's healing. And I was like, oh, right. But I used to be the one that used to go hug somebody because it's like, oh, I need to do something. But like now you learn it's just the person just wants to, they're being vulnerable. And then when you go hug on them, you're kind of telling them like, oh no, that's bad. You need to stop that. Kind of like when you tell a little kid to stop crying. So that was a really interesting point to think about.
Yeah, that's when we've been talking about that in the boundaries class too, about, you know, fixing, needing to fix, right? There's a lot of deep dynamics. You know, I know in my family, there's a very strong tendency to want to fix anything that's like uncomfortable for someone else. And so it can really get in the way of listening when we go immediately to either I want to make myself feel better or I want to make you feel better, right? Instead of just holding space for that. And that can be about containment boundaries. So tying it into boundaries too, listening and boundaries are related. Yeah, Mary.
I wondered, that is, do you think people share that and cry and want sympathy and somebody to make them like, I'm so sorry, to make over them? Is that part of a possibility, or is that my need to want to fix?
It's interesting. I think there probably are people who do have emotional reactions for attention. That may be a cry for help or a cry for attention. There's probably different, that's a possibility. That would be one of those situations where I think it would be good to ask more questions,
Mm,
whatever way, right? To kind of try to see what's actually going on with that person, or even just watching a little longer
right.
to see if you can discern what's actually happening there. It's a good question, though.
Yeah, you used the phrase earlier tonight, Kim. One of my favorite phrases, tell me more, you know. It's such a good thing, you know, it's like getting someone started, right? Or someone is started and you're wondering, is that it, or are there more layers to it? And we don't get to this stage in life without having a lot of layers, you know, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to circle back to something that Jerry Ann said, and about that listening from a place of neutral, sometimes being the appropriate thing or being a wonderful thing. And then other times, like sometimes it's our job to listen to specific things, right? I mean, if you're a researcher or you're like, you might be like, how many times does this happen in a minute? Like that's, you're looking for just that particular thing. I've been taking a course on equine ethology, and they were talking about like how to observe, like technically, how do you observe without putting your biases on things? And it was giving several different ways that they observe, and some are that you'd be like, so if you're observing the wild horses, how many times does this horse step forward with its right front foot in an 30 minutes or whatever, right? And that's all you would watch for, is just that one thing. But you're missing, of course, everything else, but you might be trying to get to a certain type of information that's useful for. And then she talked about another way that you can observe, which is like look out at the herd. And she called it, I think, using like fuzzy vision. You're not focusing on anything. You're just kind of trying to take in the whole, and maybe you'll identify patterns or movements, things like that. So different ways of watching. There's also different ways of listening for specific things, or for just being neutral and see what comes through. Neither is better or worse, just different.
Well, it seems to me too that our the state of our own being, whether we have anxiety or let's say we're really super relaxed, or you know, somewhere in between, does have some influence, or quite a bit of influence, on how we listen, you know, because there's an interpretation process going on, right? We're bringing our own unique self to how we process what we're listening to. Like each of us might be, we're each, I mean, I'm thinking of all of you, I'm looking at all of you, you're each unique. And I could maybe tell you something, you know, about myself or an experience, and each one of you might perceive information about what I shared a little bit differently, or almost like, you know, through the prism of who you are. And that might be really special, that who you are and what you hear or observe is unique, and it might be a gift, you know, to the other person, because it was you who listened to me, not just anyone, you know. I mean, and I think when I personally feel especially heard, there's something about the person who's listening, the uniqueness of who they are, that allows for it to be quite a gift, you know, in the exchange of information. So there's a lot, I don't know that there's, like, we're talking about things kind of technically, but there's something very specific to me and unique about how each person might hear or receive information about another or about an animal. You know, like, I think of my daughter who's just like, she can go, it seems like she can go anywhere and cats will show up, you know, wild cats or cats from a barn or cats. And she's like a cat whisperer. Like there would be no cats and suddenly there's a cat at her feet. You know, why is that? I don't know. There's something unique that happens between her and that animal. I don't know what it is. I go to talk to the cat, they could care less about me. I can't receive anything from, you know, I mean, I know that's a really kind of comical example, but
It's a good
maybe it's the same with horses, you know, it's the same. We think that somebody else has some special gift or some special thing that we're supposed to be just like them, but what if we are just embracing how special we are in our unique listening, and then, you know, celebrate what we hear from the animal that we're with and not compare or label to somebody else what they heard, but just hear what we hear.
Mary, you
I
look,
don't know. It seems like a lot of work I observe that Kim does is people go out and they're having like a really deep thing with your horses. There's stuff going on. And then it's very unique to those people who show up with your horses,
oh, it is.
right? I mean,
And that's been really, really fun for me, is to realize like my horses will say things to other people that I've never seen them say to me, or they'll behave differently or do something differently. And it's fascinating, right? And I'm lucky I'm able to not take it from an egotistical place at all. Like I'm excited for them that they found someone to connect with in that way at that level. And it shows us that, yeah, every interaction, listening, talking, receiving, every two living beings that do it differently. Yeah.
Can I circle back to something Mary said earlier, talking about that you don't have the 25 years of hands-on work that I have. So, you know, you're a novice at that, but yet you still bring, if you were to do hands-on work, you would probably find something that would be different than what I would find, just because you're a different human. You know, you're at a different vibration, really. And I love that. You know, I had the opportunity many years ago to work with a lot of talented therapists in an intensive situation. And there'd be two of us, two, three, four of us, quite well trained, and we would all check in and evaluate our client. And we always wanted to find something that was unique that just I found, you know. I wanted to find common things too that other people found, but I wanted to, you know, we all had, oh yeah, I see this. Really? I don't feel that, you know. And again, the uniqueness of each person. And it just it sort of validates we all need to be different. You know, my God, if we were all the same, it would just be insane. And having all these different modalities, you know, validates it even more, I think, you know. So, and yeah.
I didn't, I probably said that so it was, I don't know, misconstrued. I just admire the talent that you have, and I would love to be able to do that. I've watched Kim and I've watched all these people, and I just don't have that gift to feel it. And
Well,
I just think it's fascinating.
yeah, so Mary, I'm just going to suggest that you do have that gift, and that
Oh
you,
yeah.
and instead of saying I can't feel anything, just say, what do I feel now?
Mm.
And what if I could feel? What, you know, what if? Instead of saying that you can't.
Yeah, that was life changing for me. I would say, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when this will sound crazy, but a couple different people who did readings told me, oh, you're supposed to be, you have intuitive gifts. You should be a animal communicator. You should be this, like, and I'm like, what? I've never had anything. What are you talking about? No, animals don't talk. I don't hear things. Right. And it took a long time for me to even open up to, like, what does it mean to receive information? What does it mean for me? How do I receive it? And at first it would be things, and I'd be like, that I think I just made that up. Like, that's just in my head, whatever. So you go through the whole process, but you just have to play with it. You just have to be able to say, what if that actually was a message, right? And then explore a little more and go, oh, actually, I think that was true, right? Anyway, giving ourselves permission to listen to ourselves from a neutral place, without the judgment, without the saying I can or I can't, and just play. You never know, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Trust it, trust it. We all have we're all healers. So
I mean, yeah, we all kind of have a lot of the same genetic, right? DNA and
Mhm.
everything. So, like, there's a lot that we haven't explored or utilized, or
And in all of the discussions, only once have I heard someone mention that language itself can be a barrier to listening. And someone was trying to struggle to put what they do into words, and I said, well, it's hard to put into words. Words can trip us up a lot when we try to limit ourselves to language, and yet that's how we're taught. That's how we're raised culturally. I know when my husband had a very serious stroke and had Wernicke's aphasia and couldn't speak for 4 years, and it became my responsibility, nor could he understand language. So for 4.5 years, it was a job to learn how to communicate with someone who had always depended on language to express feelings and things. It was very difficult.
I'm curious though, Aunt Kathy, how I know that there had to have been times when you just intuited, right? What Uncle Norm.
I'd say most of the time. Most of the time it became and maybe that's before why I mentioned body language when you first said, are there other ways of listening? Maybe that's where that came from, because I had to rely a lot on what the body was telling me, what the eyes were telling me, to just try to get a message. And sometimes that wouldn't work either. I mean, sometimes I had to draw pictures, and then he couldn't understand the pictures either. So it was hard. The listening became very, very difficult, and it became to the point where anybody who was working with him couldn't understand him either. And then they became very dependent on me. Well, what's he trying to tell me? What's he saying? And how, 99% of the time I didn't know either. But it's a very well, it was a lot of soul searching going on, but it was a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden be so dependent on language, and then we don't have the language to try to just communicate even basic body needs. I'm thirsty, or I want to eat, or I don't want to eat. It was a challenge.
Yeah. And it's interesting because language, like, when you look at life on Earth, right, human language is a blip in how long that has been here, but yet life has been communicating with life all this time and doing really a much more beautiful job with it, frankly, probably than we do with all the complications of language and so many other things. But yeah.
We've spoken at other times about the trees reaching out underneath the ground with their roots and communicating with each other.
Listening to each other, talking to each other. Yeah. And when we focus on language, you know, we kind of attune ourselves to just hear that. That kind of reminds me of Mary saying, I want to go outside and hear the nature sounds, right? They're always there. We just don't hear them. I'll have sessions out here. We're talking. And then we'll say, let's just get quiet and do a little sensory meditation. And suddenly we notice all the sounds that have been happening the whole time. We were just so focused in on listening to the language, right? And something interesting that happened just recently, some of you know, last year I was like, got obsessed watching this live eagle cam, a pair of eagles. And anyway, fascinating. I got really kind of addicted to it. And but I learned what the sound of eagles talking to each other is, how eagles call. Wasn't something that I was familiar with. And just last week I was walking on my street and I was like, that's an eagle, right? I could hear I knew that it was an eagle, and I was able to follow it and find the eagle in the tree. Matter of fact, it's two young eagles who I think are maybe recently fledged from the nest and are hanging out. And I've 5 days in a row have walked and I see the eagles and I hear them first, and I see them at this same area every day. But again, I had to be attuned to what that sound was, so it had meaning to me before. Otherwise, I don't think I wouldn't like, well, that's a strange whistle. It wouldn't have occurred to me what it was. Don't know really where I'm going with that, except that the more we learn to listen beyond just our language, there's so many other things to hear. Yeah, they're happening. Another thing, Aunt Kathy, when you talked about the other caretakers would ask you, well, what's he saying, right? What's Uncle Norm saying? What does he want? What does he mean? When I work with people and their horses, and I get these questions all the time, someone will like send me a clip of a behavior, or a horse will do something and they'll say, well, what does that mean? What is the horse saying? What is the horse saying? Like as if I magically, you know what their horse is saying. I know what some behaviors sometimes mean, but I have to ask a lot more questions. I have to see the context. I have to know so much more, because I just know like rote horse behavior. It's like us, dialects, words, nuances, context all change the meaning of something. So I can't just look at one behavior in isolation. None of us can, and know what that is. And a lot of times the owner is much more equipped to answer that question than I am, because they know their horse better than I do.
I was also reminded of my own experience when Jerry Ann was talking about being neutral. And I can remember getting so frustrated sometimes if I couldn't start the conversation. If I could start the conversation, whatever the conversation was, and I knew the topic, then, we could function a little bit. It was very difficult, but you could function a little bit. But if my husband introduced the topic and there was no words, you couldn't understand, you didn't have a clue what he was talking about. And all of a sudden your mind just goes in squirrely fashion, trying to figure out of all the 5 million billion topics he could be talking about. I haven't repressed all of that, but I haven't thought about it all recently until all of a sudden we were talking about this listening and the barriers of language and the words, because it was a barrier.
Well, that makes me think about going overseas and not knowing the language, right? And someone can have a whole conversation with you, and I'd be trying to look at like their body language or their facial expression, or maybe I spoke a little Spanish and they were speaking Italian. Could I pick out one word or two to try to figure out what in the world we might be talking about? Yeah. Interesting. What else is bubbling up for y'all? I'm always fascinated where these conversations go.
When you had first sent out the topic of the conversation, the first thing that popped into my head is, I don't even know where I read it, but they were talking about, I'm sure it's probably the same in Canada, but in the United States, like just say if we're listening to someone for a minute, we stop listening after 20 seconds because we're crafting our response. So we don't even hear what the person says. And that in Japan, for businessmen, I don't know if this is outside of business or not, they listen to what the person says, and then there's like this 8 to 10-second pause for the person to gather their thoughts. So that's kind of like built in their business communication so that they can listen. And when you think about that, in our culture, people can't stand a pause or silence. So if there's a break in conversation, people just have to fill it with anything. But if we built that into like, okay, there's an 8 seconds doesn't sound like that long, but if you count to 8, people get uncomfortable and then they just have to fill it. But if that was built in, like, yeah, I'm going to pause because I'm going to listen to everything that you say and then collect my thoughts.
That's beautiful. I
Do
mean,
they do that outside of business?
I don't know. They didn't talk about that. That would
Yeah.
be interesting to see. And it's funny because I'm listening to this recording of a guy giving a talk, and he's very deliberate and slow, and he pauses between the words. And the first half an hour, I kept on thinking, did it stop playing? And it wasn't. He just pauses between words, and I'm not used to that. Now I stop checking my phone to make sure I didn't get turned off, but it was interesting.
yeah, that would be a really fun experiment to do, like in a family or a household, is to say, let's just experiment with taking 8 seconds between each person's ending sentence.
Right.
I think that's fascinating, and the other thing I was thinking about is our breath. Like when we're listening, are we breathing? How are we grounded? How are we breathing while we're listening ourselves? Because I know when I've been trying to listen to my mare and spend time with her, that my breath and my breathing has been a big focus for me, and it's helped me to slow down and to, I think slow down and listen better, or see more, or observe more, because it slows my mind, my word mind, the where I'm forming words or thoughts or labels or whatever. It just slows everything down. So I just wonder, like, when we sit with another person, or we're with another person, how we're breathing with them or in that space, if we'll hear something different or receive something different while in the silence of us just breathing, looking at him. I think that's fascinating. 8 seconds. That's amazing.
And there's times when we stop breathing completely because
Right. Holding your breath when someone else is talking, like, because we're getting anxious, or it's causing, we're having a reaction to them. I mean, the breathing has helped me to be more aware of my body, what it's doing in the presence of someone else too, or another animal. So I was just thinking of that with
that also makes me think a little bit about well, partly when you were talking, I was thinking about how my partner Chris is he's a word conservationist, right? Like if it doesn't need to be said, he doesn't say it, right? Which is actually a beautiful thing. It was so uncomfortable when I first met him because there are these long periods of silence. Luckily, I'm very comfortable. I love silence too. But at first, it was awkward because I never met anyone who was perfectly fine with just nothing being said until something needed to be said, right? But the other thing that I went to as you were talking was that we can get weary of listening, right? It can be hard to listen well when do you ever have those conversations where you're just like at the end, you're like, whew, my brain is full. I've been listening so much. I can't take in anymore. Right. So our mental state or our level of energy and attention has to do with how we listen to. Yeah. One of Peggy's big things is rest. She has a Facebook group called Rest Seekers, which is beautiful.
Rest, yeah.
But she and I talk a lot about the importance of rest. I don't know where that comes in with listening. Yeah, Karen. Yeah.
It's still about that. It's this pause that we're talking about, really, is that we're so busy trying to fill up, right? Filling the space all the time that that um that sometimes that the pause, at least I'm thinking, culturally, that the pause just is completely missed.
Mhm.
And I love, like, it, and bringing the breath, as Jerry Ann was saying, bringing, like, the importance of the fact that the breath is that truly that connection to that, is our physical connection to that space of quiet and stillness, and where we find that's the rest, like in a piece of music. um you've got the notes and all that going on, but truly what allows it to be melodic is the fact that it has space.
There's pauses.
Mhm. So that when we are listening, we're not, it's all of that,
Mm.
not
I love
just
that it's relinquishing control. I think there's a large part in our society. Kim used the words, people jump in to try to fix the problem, and if in the process of fixing it, they can be in control of it.
Mhm.
A lot of people can't be quiet and just listen because their mind is already, I gotta get a hold of this. I gotta offer them an idea. I gotta give them an suggestion, and I've got to solve this. And I think, a lot of us have kind of been trained that way, rather than, as said, just to pause and to listen.
Karen, I saw you cheering when she talked about the pause. What does that bring up for you?
There's that whole thing about practice the pause. I don't know, like, where I first heard that term, but it's really important. When you're listening, when I'm treating, it's find the place where those pauses happen, and allow it to happen. When I'm treating the nervous system, we'll go into a place of what we call therapeutic rest, and it's a place of pause, and it really is just allowing the body just to hold that space. The body's doing its own healing. It's not me healing the body, it's me holding the space so the body can do its work. And it's so beautiful when that happens, and being mindful of that, and listening for that to happen, and just allowing, and for me, celebrating the pause, so cheering it on. Yay.
Shiloh has really been teaching me pause as he heals. I can do something and he'll kind of just freeze. If I do something more, he's going to be gone. But if I just wait, if I breathe, I just wait. And sometimes it's a long wait. Lately, it's been waiting when he's learned that if the water, he has his favorite little, it's one of my, I have big water troughs and I have this little plastic pink water trough. Shannon knows where it is. For some reason, Shiloh likes me to fill that one up, and he wants to drink it right after it's fresh and I've put it in. So he'll go to that water, and Bart, the pig, flips this water trough over every day. So it gets empty. And then I'll put the pig up and I'll put the horses back into that area. And Shiloh has learned, he'll walk to the pink water trough and then he'll look at me. He's asking me to please come fill it up. But then as I approach my presence, sometimes depending how fast I do it, he'll back up a little. And then he'll wait. He doesn't want to put his head in it while I'm filling it up, but I'll stand there while I'm filling it up, and he'll stand back and he'll wait, and then I'll turn it off. And I'm trying to help him feel safe enough. If I walk away, he'll come right to it and drink. And sometimes I just walk away so he can have his drink. Other times I just hang there, and it's just a question of, if I'm here, can you get comfortable enough to come over? He could say yes or no. But if I wait, he will. But and I've learned to watch, it's this for a long time. Then his head will just lower a little. And then there'll be a sigh. And the head will come a little bit more. Then one step. Then he'll wait. And I'm speeding it up. This goes very slow. And then he's like, I'll come in. And by the time he comes in, then it doesn't matter if I move or anything else. I don't scare him. It's like he has de-escalated or self-regulated his own internal system so that when he comes forward, he's perfectly comfortable with it. But if I were just anxious about it, like, anyway, it's the pause. He's taking the time it takes. And if I can get quiet and not really want it to happen and just allow and just notice and watch the steps now of know what's going on in his body by having observed him. So anyway, I don't know where that got me, but he's teaching me a lot about just pausing and giving a lot of time for the conversation to continue. Yeah. Got about 15 minutes if we want to use it. But anything that you all came into this conversation, maybe, you knew the topic coming in that you were hoping we might talk about or thought we might talk about that we haven't touched on. Whoops.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was the phone that fell off and not you.
Everybody pause. We haven't touched on, and not that I would be able to offer anything, but we haven't touched too much on the animal world listening to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us have mentioned birds, and that they've got to be communicating at some level and things. I mean, your horses communicate. How do they listen to each other?
I think listening is a multisensory experience from what I can tell with them. Maybe it's all more integrated, or it appears to be perhaps more integrated than it is for us. We are very, we're language oriented, so we listen with our ears mostly. I feel like they're using all the senses, listening, hearing, smelling, feeling. I think a lot of it's energetic communication. Just from the little bits of time, it makes me very curious about animals and how we'd call it psychic, intuitive they are. But certainly there are many, many, many times on this farm when I have thought something, and the next thing I know, the horses are doing it. I will think, oh, in a few minutes, I should move the horses to the back. A couple minutes later, they're walking to the back. And it's like, it's happened enough that it doesn't happen every time. So it's not like this magic thing I can make happen, but it's that clearly it's happened enough that I'm like, somehow they got that message. It's part of what makes me think we all have these abilities. It's just, I think, language and all of our all of the way that we function, and we're practicing functioning in the human world, we're not using it, right? That sixth sense, that so there's that. And then another thing I definitely have paid a lot of attention to with the birds, I am 100% convinced they pay a lot more attention to what we're doing than we are to what they're doing. And the birds are absolutely in relationship with me on this farm when I notice. And they notice when I notice them.
So there's a very real thing called bird language, and it's more than it's exactly what you're talking about, Kim. It's more than just a communication thing. It's a way of being.
The way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the natural world notices just so much more than we do.
and we have these overactive frontal lobes, and so it's actually very challenging for us. We need to be trained to practice the pause, right? And to slow it down. And you know, one of my big takeaways from my time with you, Kim, and your herd was again, being way more mindful of that space and the speed and the space, you know, that is there and can be created and held, and so much how much more can happen when the whole when everybody's listening a whole lot better, you know, and just holding that space um, to be heard, to be seen, to be noticed, and that it's all good until it isn't, you know, or until it needs to shift or until it needs to change, and that dynamic.
Yeah.
Somebody brought up the animals, and I have a little stray cat that's been hanging out for a couple weeks now, and I'm thinking about how I've been communicating with it. It's causing ruckus at the neighbors next door, beating up the cat that lives there, and so I thought, well, it's welcome to be over here as long as it's not killing a lot of things, but it's in its nature to kill birds or bunnies. But what do I want to say about it? The cat talks in meow language with me. If I meow to hear it, I don't know if it's a boy or girl, it meows back. So and I've taken time just to stand around and meow with it, you know, and then it comes closer, and I've gotten it to, you know, eat some food rather than trying to eat my bunnies, which I appreciate. So now it kind of comes around to do that, and it's coming closer. If I sit on a chair and I'm just quiet, sometimes it will come and eat. But I don't know, what am I trying to say about this? The cat, when I watch the cat in its natural environment, it's quite feral. It's in survival mode all the time. And if it's talking with me and a little fly or something buzzes by it, its attention goes right to that. So its nervous system is cued for it to listen. I mean, it's listening and it in its survival mode all the time, right? And I think maybe that's what happens with us. I mean, as humans, we get habituated. I don't know if that's quite the right scientific word, but we get habituated to what we're going to put our attention on, right? So even if I'm trying to get the cat's attention, it's already in pattern for its survival. And maybe we as humans kind of do that too with each other when we're in conversation or listening, or you know, people get habituated to their pattern. We are creatures of habit too. It takes a lot to undo our habits in how we, you know. And I think about that with the horse too. The other thing I was going to say about listening with I've only recently been able to experience slowing down enough to know when my horse is asking me a question in response to something I asked her to do, and she made an attempt, or she checked in to ask a question. Was that it? You know? And I'm like, oh, I'm finally in this communication give and take, just kind of finally when I'm riding her, hearing when she's having a conversation with me. It's the most beautiful thing. It's like, oh my gosh, she does want to stay connected and have a conversation about all this, because she and I are in a trust relationship now, and we're both comfortable, and she just asked me a question. I was like, wow. But my teacher has to remind me, did you hear that? She just asked you a question.
Well, and
Like,
can you imagine
are
being
you listening? You
in
know?
our position? Of course, if somebody's on our body, right? How would we not want to be in communication with them about the fact that they're sitting on our body? Or like if someone's even holding my hand, you know, you kind of want to be in communication about when that stops being comfortable or how it's comfortable, or right. Anytime that we're in physical contact with another, yeah.
True, true, Kim, I agree. But we can each, the horse as well as myself, can be numb or checked
yeah.
out or not, you know, like somebody could be holding your hands for 10 years and you just don't even feel it when they grab your hand anymore, right? I mean, it's a full body awareness to have that, to feel that. And for the horse, you know, for the horse as well as the human, you know?
I
But I'm
love
just saying that the act of connection or the moment of connection, that space of connection when I heard or she said or whatever, there to me that's a you know, sacred, special place that makes my heart like warm all over, you know. It
beautiful.
just it especially if it's an interspecies conversation, whether it's my cat or you know, the robin on my fence, the interspecies part of that is really special. Humans are special too. I don't like to listen to humans, but when it's an interspecies thing, it's pretty cool.
Well, and that's a great way to bring back to, I think, you know, this is an interconnected world, and we are supposed to be in relationship with the rest of life on Earth. We're not really, you know, we get in our houses, and what we hear is what's going on in our houses. All of this life is happening outside still, and if our windows aren't open, we aren't necessarily hearing it. So it's another aspect too, I think, of like the cat noticing lots of things. We're just very conditioned not to be really listening to our thoughts or our head or the TV or whatever, but not necessarily everything that's going on in the world around us. The way we live, we're not listening to that most of the time by living in houses. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. And I think I'm going to be listening to this one back a couple times and taking notes from it later. I'm glad I recorded it, and I will be posting it tomorrow. But anybody have any final thoughts you want to add, or do you feel complete? Everyone's complete. Karen?
Enjoyed it very much.
I did too.
Oh, there's Shannon. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming in and joining right away. Yeah, loved this. Yeah, I'm already kind of thinking about where we might go next month, but I'm going to wait and let it sit and see. My brain paused for a little while. Just
Pause.
continue to listen to what we said tonight. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim, so
Yeah.
much for having us.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye,
good
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.